Hey friends, it's time for another Playwright tip, and today we will talk about your favorite topic, Playwright fixtures. Here we have an example test case that initializes a new dashboard page object model, and we pass in a user object that contains email and password. These credentials are then used by the login method, and afterwards we call the create_check function. Using Playwright fixtures, we can shuffle some code around, and we can hide all these setup instructions, the initialization of the page object model, into a setup step to then only call create_check in our test cases. And I love this approach because it keeps the tests dry. But one of you now on YouTube asked, okay, this is all cool, but how can I still pass parameters to my custom fixtures then? And I think this is a beautiful question, so let's find out. Here we have our create_check test case that uses the custom Playwright fixture dashboard page. And if you haven't seen or used custom fixtures yet, I highly recommend checking out this video first, because today I will only briefly explain how you can set up custom fixtures. But let's find out if this test case is doing what it's supposed to by running it in UI mode. When we run create_check, we already see that there will be here a fixture created that already navigates to a login dialog, and then it logs in, it checks if the login worked, and then we have here a click and a to be visible call, and these are the actions coming from our create_check method. So when we now have more test cases that also want to log in, we just have to use the dashboard fixture and we will receive a page object model that is already logged in, and then we can move on writing our test case. So we have the login in a single place, which is nice. But because we initialize our page object model here in the dashboard page fixture, we cannot define the email or password of this particular user. So let's make this fixture configurable. When we inspect the test case again, first of all, note that we are here using test coming from a base file, not from Playwright test itself. So let's have a look at this one. This base file imports test from Playwright test, but then renames it to base, to then be able to extend the Playwright functionality with our own custom fixture logic, and then we export it as test again. So with this setup, you can still use all the Playwright core functionality, but you can extend it with your own custom Playwright setup. And here we have our dashboard page fixture that initializes a new dashboard page, it logs in, and whatever is called here with this use method will pop out in our test cases ready to use. So how could we make email and password here configurable? One approach could be to change these hard-coded strings here to use environment variables. And this works fine. You could set up a complex end file or pass the environment variables anytime you call npx playwright test. But for cases like this one, I prefer to set up a parameterized fixture. So let's go. As a first step, I will remove my environment variables again, and I will go here above the dashboard page, and I will define that I want to set up a new fixture. Fixtures can be functions like our dashboard page, but they can also be static values. So when we now take here our user, we can paste it in, and we can also define an options object telling Playwright that this should be here an option. But now TypeScript isn't particularly happy here about it, so let's go up and define our test options. These are our custom Playwright additions. And let's define that we want to have a user that is also of type user, which I have defined in my Plum class here. So it's email and password. And now that we have a static user fixture, we can go into our dashboard page and we can say that we want to use this user that we defined here above, and we can drop all this to say, hey, we want to initialize dashboard page with our user fixture, which pretty much holds the same values. And you might now say, okay, cool, but what's the deal? Now that we defined our user fixture to be an option, we can override it from multiple places in our Playwright codebase. Let's head to the Playwright config first. Whenever you now see a use block like this one here in the global Playwright configuration, you can go in and you can override our user fixture. So you see here that I'm overriding the email with global@checklihq.com, and I'm also passing a password. Similarly, you could also tweak your projects that by default are used to control different browsers. You could say here user A, and then you can go again into the use block and you can say, okay, I want to have a different user here that is called project@checklyhq.com. So then you can define different projects using different users. And if you want to, you can even go into your spec files and you can go in here and you can say test use. And here we want to define a user, and let's paste this here. We want to have a user like this, and let's say we call this test@checklyhq. And I just think this is a beautiful way to configure your Playwright projects, and it feels very Playwright native. So let me prove to you that this actually works and head over to UI mode a final time. When we now run our create check test case, we see here that it is creating the custom fixture dashboard page. And we see now that this test case is actually failing because test@checklyhq.com doesn't exist. But we were able to override our custom user fixture here, which is pretty sweet. Let's do a quick summary. So in our test case, create check, we are using a custom fixture that initializes a new dashboard page POM object. And this whole fixture here uses another fixture that is called user, which holds some default values. But if you want to override it, you can do that from your Playwright config or even your particular spec files. And I think this is pretty good stuff. If you want to dive deeper, as always, the Playwright docs have you covered. And if you want to learn more about Playwright's nitty-gritty details, our Playwright tips playlist here on YouTube just passed 40 videos and we're not gonna stop. And that's it for today. Thank you for a very good question. If you have any more questions, drop them below. And always remember, if you use Playwright for testing your sites and apps in CI/CD, you might want to check out Checkly because we allow you to run your Playwright tests from around the globe on a schedule, and we will let you know when something is off in production. I will talk to you very, very soon again.